interviews for our unfortunately, many of you may know this, our Vice President for Finance, Chuck Mann, is retiring after 15 years of incredible service to the college. So actually, Nancy joined me on that process. So we have spent 2 days in Zoom and been doing that remotely, and my technology sort of ran out. So I'm reduced to my phone and not a video. So apologize for that. But anyway, welcome. Thank you for coming. Everything is going great at Hood. Spring has returned. The campus is blooming. It's beautiful, although I know it's raining there today. It's just been really great for everybody to sort of be together again. We call, I think Debbie, our provost, coined this term, the Oscar season of Hood College. So we are right into everyday honor society inductions, honors presentations, finalization of student projects, theater performances, dance performances, you name it. I just love it. It's what makes serving this college so great, to see the wonderful culmination of all the students and the faculty and staff who support them, their hard work come together, and see the amazing things that they're doing, leading right up to commencement. So speaking of amazing students and all the amazing work they're doing, you are in for a treat. Caylee was a shining star the day she stepped on campus, and that star has only gotten brighter during her time at Hood and since. So I'm excited for her to share her wonderful presentation with us. So in closing, just want to say thank you all for your support of college. It is Scholarship Day, and I know the gifts have been coming in as they do throughout the year. We just couldn't do it without all of you. So appreciate your support of the college. And thanks for being here. And it does look like our trustee, Hamp Tisdale, has joined us. So thank you, Hamp, for being with us as well.
I apologize for being late.
That you were worth waiting for, Hamp. I appreciate you joining. But I'm going to jump back to Andrea. It was a perfect segue, Andrea, because I was going to ask Nicole Rolls, who's our Director of Annual Giving, to give us a quick Scholarship Day update before we launch into Caylee.
Just as I unmuted, we got another gift. So I'm really, really thrilled to say we've had over 100 donors today, and we are just over, looks like we're right at $30,000. So it's a really fantastic day. And I love crowdfunding days because our emphasis is that every gift of every size has a huge impact here at Hood. So thank you everybody who's given, and I'm going to try and keep the dings quiet on my end as gifts continue to come in.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So welcome, Hamp. Thank you for being here. We just were talking about Caylee's Chair of the Board scholarship that was made possible through the efforts of the board. So thank you for representing that. And of course, I always want to welcome Mary Alice Peeling, who's class 76. Looks like we've got quite a range represented here tonight, so that's always fun. I am going to now turn it over to our guest star, Caylee Winpigler, class of 21. The floor is yours, my dear.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for the warm welcome. It's nice to be back at Hood, even if virtually. Like I was telling them before, I take every opportunity I can to swing back by. And also welcome to my brand new apartment. So I've been here for a month now. And so I'd like to, welcome you to the space. I am going to start sharing my screen so we can kick this presentation off. We'll start at the beginning. So, like I said, welcome. I'm happy to be here at Hood's Happy Hour. I do not have a beverage for happy hour, as I figured you'd probably want me less intoxicated and giving a coherent presentation. So I figured we would start with how I got to Hood, a little bit of background about me. So I grew up in Walkersville, which is like 15 minutes from Hood. And so since I was like, and even I had swimming lessons when I was like a kid, 7, 8 years old, I had swimming lessons at Hood. So I knew Hood pretty well. And I didn't even want to go to Hood when I was first looking at places because it was too close. And I thought, I'm going to go away. I'm going to Montana. I'm going across the country. I'm going anywhere else but here. But through the persistence of my parents, who encouraged me again and again to at least look at Hood, I fell in love. The moment I stepped on a campus and I met, Mr. Brown and all of the other faculty. And it was actually at the honors day that I had gone to, one of the first events, that I met Dr. Eager for the first time. And so meeting all of these incredible people, I was like, there's nowhere else I can go. And so knowing I wanted to go to Hood, I knew that finances were going to be a little bit of an issue for me because I'm the oldest of 4 children, which you can see featured here on the right. And so I knew I was the oldest of 4, and I knew my parents would not be able to financially contribute to my education. And so I was, in my senior year, frantic to get money. So I was applying to all these scholarships. I probably applied to like 30. And, you know, most of them didn't end up going through. And so, you know, it was like super disheartening. And then one day in the mail, I got this letter that I was being considered for this full tuition scholarship. And I was blown away. Like, I did not anticipate that. I did not think that of all the students that you could have picked from, me. So I was shell shocked. And we had a day of interviews where you went in. And when I had my interview, I was like, sure that I didn't get it. Like, I came out of the interview near tears, talking to my dad. I was like, we should just go home now and give up. Like, but I was super blessed and pleased when a week later I got the letter that I was accepted as the chair of the board scholar. And so that chair of the board scholarship affected me in numerous ways while I was at Hood. First of all, it gave me the opportunity to network and meet some incredible people. I was a part of an amazing cohort, which is partially featured here, missing one of our additional scholars. But through this group, I made like my best friend. Like, we still talk at least twice a month. And that's the girl that's sitting next to me, Natalie Kolosaiki. And I think I knew we were going to be best friends when, at this very dinner, right before this picture was taken, she turned to me and she said, "Do I have chocolate in my teeth?" And I was like, "You don't, but are we friends now?" And so like, the magic of the group of us that was created was something that carried with us throughout our time at Hood. Like, Jenna and I and Grace and I lived on the same floor our freshman year. So we were really close that way. And then Jenna and Grace did sports together. So we were always together and connected, and often got mixed up for each other. But with that, I had the opportunity to do a life swap for a day with President Chapdelaine, which was a blast. So I got to sit in on her meetings, and she came to class with me. And then we eventually had lunch together. And so that was also a really awesome experience, because President Chapdelaine is one of my absolute idols at Hood. And the final thing that this scholarship gave me was a stipend that I could use in any capacity I wanted. So if, like, I had an internship and I wanted to travel to DC and needed to pay for bus or gas, like, that could cover that. If I wanted to take a trip abroad, I could do that. If it was, you know, some other experiential learning, that could be put towards that. And so I used that stipend to take a trip to France, which we'll talk about momentarily, because that also impacted my trajectory at Hood. So, in being the superstar that everyone says I am, I got involved with a lot of things at Hood, which I loved so much, and leaving them last year was so heartbreaking. But I know that they're in good hands. So I just, you know, this is a short snapshot, and if you have questions about any of these, I'm totally happy to dive deeper into them. But I was the editor of Wisteria since my freshman year at Hood. And these are our magazines, which I'm so happy to share with you. They're gorgeous. And all of this that's contributed is made by students. So it's students' artwork, students' poems and poetry, and that kind of thing. And so we created those every year, and I was in charge of leading that creation process. Our newest edition just came out, so hit up the new editor if you want that copy. I was also the president of History Club, and loved every minute of that. I think Dr. Harrison may have tired of my shenanigans just a little bit, but I have started a post-it note war on his door. So I have left my legacy in that capacity. And Model United Nations was also a huge passion project of mine. And Dr. Eager was super instrumental in that and getting me involved, and her leadership and guidance was phenomenal. And I don't think I could have done it without her, because that was a club that you sort of needed to like start it from the ground up. So these are a lot of the other things that I did. I was also a member of the honors program, and that offered me a lot of opportunities. For example, I did an internship or a volunteer position in downtown Frederick with the Literacy Council. And that was eye-opening. And I think it also influenced me to where I'm working right now at the Ausherman Family Foundation and into that role of nonprofit work. So this is just a little snapshot, and I'm totally happy to talk about more of these later. But in continuing with my stipend and how I used that, my trip to France was amazing, and I'm so glad I was able to have that. It was over the summer of 2019, and I traveled with two of my favorite Hood College professors. One of them is Dr. Dodman, and the other one's Dr. Campion. And when I declared myself a history major, Dr. Campion was my advisor. So he and I grew really close through that process of like me coming to his office in tears, not knowing what class I was going to take, just the regular sorts of things. And so this trip was of the World War I history and literature class that I took in my freshman year. And I took it because I thought it would be a good way for me to figure out whether or not I wanted to be a history and English major. And so when the opportunity to travel abroad came up, and I was like, I've got to use the stipend for this. It almost covers the whole thing. I can go. So the chair of the board scholarship really helped me in getting here as well. And I was also so fascinated and intrigued by the material that we were covering in World War I history, because it wasn't something that in my public education we had talked a lot about. So I just latched on to it, and I was super eager to go. And some of the places that we got to go to were like the Palace of Versailles, which is as breathtaking as everyone says it is. So I recommend you go. We went to World War I trenches. We went to Thibodeau, which is, and I'm pretty sure I'm not saying that correctly, but it is a memorial in France, and it is just ginormous with thousands of names on it of the soldiers that died during the war. And it's super impressive, but it was a phenomenal trip. And it was this trip that then led me to my next opportunity at Hood, which was a research assistantship with Dr. Campion and Dr. Dodman. So Dr. Campion and Dr. Dodman were writing a book about the memories of the First World War through exploring different memorials in different cities. They had one in England, one in Germany, and one in the United States, which was in Frederick. So over the summer of 2020, I started a research assistantship with them, and I was combing through newspaper articles and reading up about the memorial and trying to figure out how did Frederick, if you've seen the Frederick Memorial, it is a woman at the top with her arms like sort of like the Statue of Liberty, and she's holding a sword and she's holding an olive branch. And it's a really fascinating representation of the First World War and what the United States wanted people to understand from us, from the outcome of the war, that we're still holding this sword and we're ready and prepared to fight again, but we are extending this olive branch of friendship to move beyond this point, and hopefully we can move forward, which was probably the concept of the League of Nations and what everyone hoped would come out of that, although it didn't work. And so that memorial is there. And another element to that memorial that is fascinating and something we wanted to figure out the why to was that the memorial is segregated. And so when we saw this, because I saw it for the first time as an undergrad, and I was just blown away. Like I hadn't even thought of that being an aspect to a memorial, and we wanted to dig down on that and find out why. And so we really explored this memorial. I was digging into newspapers every day, and it was a truly wonderful experience. And I did it again in 2021. And this picture is from 2021 when I was doing my research assistantship, and they were also teaching a course. So they were teaching a course on World War I history to like high school and middle school teachers to help them understand how they could communicate the First World War history to their students in an effective way. For example, my brother's in high school and he just learned about the First World War, and what the teacher did was turn on All Quiet on the Western Front and just let them watch it, which isn't an effective way to really learn about the history of the First World War. So they were teaching teachers how to teach. And part of that experience was that we got to go to DC and do a virtual tour with them. And we rode these scooters that you see featured here around. And it was really funny because Dr. Campion and I got the swing of the scooters really fast. We were just flying around, and Dr. Dodman's just like slowly trotting along. And we were like, Dr. Dodman, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? And he was like, well, I have a confession to make. One, I've never ridden a scooter. And we were like, well, okay. And two, he said, when I rode my bike once, I broke my arm. He's like, so I'm very fearful of these kind of things. And we were like, you could have explained this to us in the beginning and we would have like taken it easier on you. But no, and so it was a blast going to DC. And it was also like sort of as we thought the pandemic was sort of calming down. So it felt like that relief to finally get out of the house and see DC again and explore and share the history with the course that they were teaching. But when I was doing all of my research, Dr. Campion and I were meeting weekly because the pandemic was happening, so we were only doing it virtually. And he wanted me to gain more from this experience than just the research. You know, the original idea was, oh, I was going to travel to all these archives, but with the pandemic, everything was shut down. So instead, what we did was we wanted to find a topic of interest within that research that I was doing for me to write an academic article with him about. And so what happened was is one day Dr. Campion came to me and he said, have you seen this memorial? And I said, no, I mean, I've lived in Frederick my whole life. I've never seen it. Do any of you know, and this, you know, feel free to unmute yourself or throw it into the chat. Do any of you know who the figure is on the top of the memorial? And someone who I have not already told who that is.
It definitely looks like a female though, Caylee, is that correct?
Yes. Which was interesting.
Mhm.
Rachel and Roger, do you have a guess? I see you unmuted.
Is it either Columbia or Betsy Ross?
No, those are good guesses though. So it's actually Joan of Arc, which is right, which is super fascinating. Like this is an American memorial to one soldier featuring Joan of Arc. And underneath that is a nativity scene. And it's just a complex and confusing memorial. And it's also breathtaking, like, especially when you go see it in person and you see this life-size or bigger than life-size Joan of Arc standing above you, watching sentry over this soldier. You're like, who built this? Why? And what was the significance of William Bunkie, who this is built to? So we had all of these questions and we were like, this is the thing. We are writing something about this. And in our research, we discovered a lot about not only William Bunkie, but a lot about the cemetery where he's buried. So to give you a little bit of context on what we learned about William Bunkie, he was just an incredible character. So he was born in Baltimore, Maryland. And at some time before he turned 9 years old, he was orphaned. And he was adopted by a family in Liberty Town named the Smiths. He was separated from his brother, and I don't know where his brother ever went, but I did get to talk to a descendant of his brother, Stephen, which was almost like talking to a movie star. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're related to William Bunkie, this guy that I'm like researching. And so that was awesome. But so William Bunkie gets adopted and he lives with the Smiths, but he's not like their adopted son. He's technically their servant. And so he's there being their servant, 9-year-old kid, and he grows up, but they were also very gracious enough to have him educated at the local church. So Bunkie was super integrated with the church community. And then in 1917, when the United States enters the First World War, William Bunkie was drafted. And he was drafted along with a lot of his other friends and community members from Frederick. One of them being Francis X. Xavier, who has a American Legion Lodge named after him in Emmitsburg, where he was from. So William Bunkie was drafted, and then in October of 1918, he and Francis X. Xavier were in a shell hole together, and their shell hole was hit with a bomb, and they were both injured. Bunkie was injured in the leg, and they were taken back to camp, but they died the following day from the injuries that they sustained. And so he was now in France, and they communicated this back to his family. He also was talking to everyone back at home because they were publishing his letters in the newspaper. So in one of his letters, in fact, because he was an ardent Catholic, in one of the letters, he was explaining how you would tell the like priests about your sins, and they had these sin cards that you would like show, because the priests were French, and so they didn't speak English, and so they would show him a card like, yeah, this is what I did. And so someone from the community, whether or not it maybe was the pastor or the priest Kavanaugh, or one of his family members, requested his body be returned. His body wasn't returned until 1921 due to Franco-American negotiation problems. The French didn't want the Americans coming in and digging up all of their land to retrieve all of these dead bodies. And so it was a long process. But Bunky was one of the few that came back to the United States. And not only did he return, but he received a massive celebration and memorial to him. For example, like I was explaining, Francis X. Xavier, he went to war at the same time Bunky did. It died the same way, but had a very quiet ceremony and funeral. He only had mostly his family there, and he's buried in just like a regular headstone in Emmitsburg. Bunky, though, had hundreds of people show up to his funeral at the church. And then, of course, they erected this massive memorial to him. And so we, in exploring his life and his legacy, we came to the conclusion, because there was no evidence to indicate why he was such a profound figure within the community, but we felt as though he was Frederick's unknown soldier, because he had no direct lineage and blood relatives in Frederick. He was Frederick's star, and every mother, sister, brother, father could hang their hat on him and on his grave and visit him if they didn't have their son at home or their son buried with them. And so we felt that that's why he had such a profound impact on the community, is because he was anyone's son. He was the community's son. And he is also steeped in a cemetery of memory and of memorial. In the back of the cemetery he's buried in is the Grotto of Lourdes. There's a replication of the Grotto of Lourdes in Liberty Town. There's also an African-American service member from the First World War buried in the same cemetery as William Bunky, and he served with the Buffalo Soldiers. He did come back alive, but was tragically killed in a car accident, and he's buried there because that's where his mother was living at the time. So he's right behind the church, and you can go see him. His name is Levi Waters. And so when I go to the church, I always visit both of them. But he had such a compelling story, and we wrapped it up into an academic article. And at some point later this year, it's going to be published in the Maryland Historical Magazine. We have to get through the last stages of editing before we can really send that away. So that's the last big thing that I did while I was at Hood. I mean, of course, there was lots of other stuff, but this was my major accomplishment that I was super proud of. And it was a labor of love to do this. And it gave me real inspiration and hope throughout the pandemic as I was exploring this, because it was something I could wake up and be excited about every day. So moving on, since I've graduated, so I graduated last May. And now I am, like I said, working full-time at the Ausherman Family Foundation, which is located in Frederick, Maryland. I became affiliated with them in my junior year when I started a board of trustee position with them. And so I became a board of trustee member, learned the ropes that way. And when graduation was coming up, I said, hey, so I'm graduating. Is there any possibility you have a job for me? And they were like, yeah, sure. So they hired me, and I came to the foundation, and the work has been so rewarding and fantastic to be able to work with the community, nonprofits in the community, and make a real difference and interact and help to develop great networks and connections. And so I love the work that we're doing, and we have an excellent team. You can see my team, in fact, featured in the blue picture. That is not tinted blue. We were in a bowling alley playing bowling together, and so the lights were blues. And so my executive director is Lee Adams, featured in the middle, and then Lori Perkins is the grant manager, and she's on the far right. And then outside of what I do for the foundation, I'm a part-time master's student at American University studying international relations. And like I was telling Kelly, we're in the middle of finals week. So this presentation, and being here with Hood again is very centering and like peaceful for me, that I get to interact and just have a little bit of fun before jumping back into finals. And my experience at American University has been fantastic. The community and the friends that I have made in the program are awesome, but not comparable to Hood, I do have to admit. But you can see my class featured here on the bottom. This was us on Halloween, and we all dressed up this year. And in fact, my professor is the one wearing the alien head from Toy Story. So we had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, so that's what I'm up to. And in terms of the future trajectory for me, I am, planning to stay in the Frederick area for at least a couple of years, and then maybe going to get my PhD in history. We'll see how everything goes and whether or not other opportunities take me down different paths. And with that, I feel like I've talked your all's ear off enough. I will open the floor to questions. And I'll actually give one more anecdote and then I'll give it over to questions. This is Winpigler's Alley, which is from my family. So my great-grandfather had 13 children. He ran a business in Frederick, and he was just a really overall generous figure. And I think he was best known for his appearances every Christmas as Santa. And so he started appearing as Santa in the late 1940s and kept doing it for about 20 years. And so by the end of his career as Santa, he was visiting like 460 kids in the Frederick community. And he wouldn't just visit them and be like, ho, ho, ho. He actually had toys and he had fruit and candy. And so everybody really remembered him that way. And so I think that in part has inspired my love and appreciation for Christmas. And so he did that. And through his business, he was also very, very generous and very integrated with the community, in like giving food out to people and that kind of thing. And so he was just an incredible figure. But this alley is named after where the business was, which is like right on Chabro, down the street from Cafe Bueno, if you're familiar with that area. So you'll definitely have to make a stop there and see Winpigler's Alley. But other than that, I am now done and I open it to your questions.
Caylee, I could listen to you talk about your history project for hours. And I mean that sincerely. Your enthusiasm just brings so much curiosity to the topic, and I thank you for that. Can you tell me again where that William Bunkie gravesite is again?
Yes, he is buried in Liberty Town, outside of St. Peter's Catholic Church.
Absolutely fascinating. I love the work that you did, and I know you loved it twice as much.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go to the chat. First of all, we need to give a shout out to Tammy, who guessed correctly that it was Joan of Arc. So good for you. And then just real quick, housekeeping. Dr. Eager had to jump off because she had another event, but she wanted to say thank you so much, Caylee, for being here. So also the same for Mary Alice. She also had to jump off, but also said she really enjoyed seeing you. All right, so the floor is open. Who has any questions for our Caylee? Or wants to tell a story about someone's brother playing baseball with someone else's brother that might be related to a Winpigler?
That's the 7 degrees of being a Rolls. Caylee, my husband and Kaylee's dad know each other for a long, long time. So.
All right. Does anybody have any questions for Caylee?
I just have
a question. Oh, go ahead.
all I want to do is just say thank you for your participation with the Literacy Council. I served on that board for about 6 years, and I'm really devoted to that particular board, but the cause. It is quite eye-opening when we find out, and it's not always, there are plenty of people who have come to this country who need help with literacy, but there are people in this country who've grown up here who need help. And it's very inspiring to watch them as they blossom as they learn. So thank you for that, and I can understand how important that was to you.
Yeah, it was super rewarding. And if you read their annual magazine that comes out with the students' work, that like brings a tear to my eye. Like, it's just so amazing. And I'm just like so impressed with the progress that the students have made and the creative ideas that they have in order to express themselves. And as someone who like did a lot with creative writing at Hood, like, and seeing what they have, it's just unparalleled. It's fantastic.
So Caylee, you may not know the answer to this yet, but since you are getting your master's in international relations, and you mentioned a possible PhD in history, I think you said, and you're working with this foundation, which while you were talking, I was looking it up. So where do you sort of see yourself landing in, 10 to 15 years? What kind of things are driving you to push you in a certain direction?
Yes, that is a great question. I definitely don't want to be static. I want to be all over the place. I have like big ideas and I want to be involved with so much. I really want to like maybe get involved with an international foundation or nonprofit. I think, especially like with what we're talking about with the Literacy Council, just the people that need help, especially like the refugee population that just, they need real assistance. And so that's really motivating me and moving me. And in fact, like Dr. Eager was on the call, I wrote a paper for her about like German refugee policy, the historical part of it. And so like, that's one thing that really inspires me, but I also really am passionate and in love with history. And so my hope is that one day I can return to that in some capacity. I don't know what yet, whether or not that be like as a professor. Right now, that's the only idea I have in my head. Somebody will pay me to do research all day. Sounds like an amazing opportunity. And so that's like what I've been thinking of, but I'm like open to whatever someone throws at me. So we'll see where the world takes me. But I know for right now, I'm like happy with where I am, and I'm just like open to seeing where the future takes me.
That's actually my next question. If you had a wish, which you could study any historical topic, what would you head towards right now, Caylee?
Oh, that's a great question. I am really being moved right now by racial inequities. And so I would love to learn more about, I took a class on African-American history in my undergrad, and that just like fueled the fire, which is like a small spark. And I know that there's so much more there to learn. So learning about like the civil rights movement or the Jim Crow era would be really fascinating. And I think learning more about African-Americans' involvement in the First World War would also be really amazing. I can't remember the name of the book, but I read a great book as part of the course that Dr. Campion taught over the summer, written by an African-American soldier, like not necessarily about his experience, but like through his eyes. And it was just so eye-opening of things that you just don't think about. And it makes you a more empathetic person. And so like, that is one of the things that I would really love to study right now and in more depth. And I know that Arch is providing a course over the summer. And so I'm thinking about throwing myself in that.
That sort of ties into your mention about, you said that the monument, the one holding the sword and the olive branch, you said it was segregated.
Yes.
Now, is that the one that's at the corner of, help me out, Bent's and?
Yes, I know. It is right there. It's like next to the Tally Rec Center.
Yes.
And they have a panel of, like when you walk up and you read the panel of the dead, there's a C next to all of the African-American soldiers that served. And it's just so alarming and jarring. And even through all of the research, we really couldn't determine why that was. But I can tell you that there was a lot of Confederate sympathizers within the Frederick community at the time, due to the fact that in the years, every year after the war, they were celebrating like General Lee's birthday and Stonewall Jackson's birthday, and they were holding like these Confederate gatherings and all of that, and it was just like so bizarre to read. Another interesting thing that happened though was there was a parade in Baltimore somewhere in those years, and I remember reading it and being like so thrilled that Confederate veterans had showed up at this parade, and they were carrying the Confederate flag. And so in a show of like not supporting them and the and in like rejection, the Union soldiers walked out of the parade, like walked away from them and just were like, no, we don't support this. And so it was really fascinating to read that they just were like, and so anyways, but like, so the sentiment in Frederick was a bit mixed. What was also interesting though is that Frederick did celebrate the Emancipation Day like events, but they did it in August because Andrew Johnson had emancipated his slaves in August, and his slaves were in Maryland. So the African American community in Frederick celebrated it in August due to that, and that was really amazing to read. It's something I think that not a lot of us knew about, and that was super fascinating to hear people gathering to celebrate that.
Thank you so much. I'm telling you, when you become a professor, I don't think I'll enroll, but I'll definitely audit your course because I like doing the work, Caylee, but I am there for you. I am there.
We can get Caylee to come back to Hood. That's what we can do.
I think that
I keep talking to Dr. Harrison and he just won't hire me.
All right, well, you keep working, and I think we can make that happen. I think
yeah.
All right, well, does anybody have any comments or questions for Caylee? Thank you for letting me indulge my history nerdness with her, which we share.
Hi, Caylee. I'm Rachel. Good to meet
Rachel,
you.
what's your class again? 97?
Sorry?
What class?
I got my BA in 96 and my MS in 2006.
There we go.
So
fantastic.
And I flew back for the graduation from here. You said that you're interested in learning more about the experience of segregation in African Americans in, the US in decades past. Something that you may find useful is if you ever have an opportunity to do an internship or a placement for an organization that's located in places that experienced a greater amount of that. I know, having spent 7 years of my childhood in the Deep South, I remember back to my school, it wasn't for years that I saw anything odd about the fact that we had 2 girls' bathrooms and 2 boys' bathrooms right next to each other, because no one spoke about it. But there are these little remnants that you won't encounter unless you actually live someplace, sort of like your experience in France. There will be things that you learned just by being there. And so if you ever have an opportunity to do that, it might be something worth considering.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's absolutely perfect. And it reminds me of something we were talking about in terms of like philanthropy too, that one organization that's located in Baltimore explicitly gives grants to Southern nonprofit organizations because funders in the South won't give to Black-led nonprofits. And it's just like so mind-blowing that they just won't fund them. And it's just, yeah, it's so weird. Yeah. That it's just very intentional that like, oh, and they find ways to ignore them, even though they're serving their community. And so it's just like crazy. And I'll have to like find the reports and share them to you because they've done studies on these organizations, and so it's just so deeply rooted in the system that we're in, and it's just so heartbreaking. And that's just like one of the things I want to overthrow, but break the shackles.
Caylee mentioned ARCH, that's an organization in Frederick, and I'm not sure the acronym, African American History and so forth locally is what it's about. And it's just starting up and people are donating things. And Caylee, you know this, but you'll find more about it. Segregation is integration is very painful here in the schools in Frederick. We still have plenty of people who remember all of that. And Frederick was, if I'm not mistaken, I came here about 50 years ago, so it was after that. But Frederick was very much a segregated town, and those scars remain. And you'll learn a lot about that right here in downtown, Baltimore, Frederick. Caylee, one inside baseball. The Ausherman Foundation was funded from work originally was done by Ernie Ausherman and then his son Marvin, but there was a Winpigler who worked very closely for Ernie Ausherman, who was I think he probably did some of the work, but he was also a sales representative. Is there a tie in there?
Almost definitely. And I'm thinking that could be Sean, maybe, if you knew his first name.
I did, but I can't recall it offhand.
Yeah.
He would have been, let's see, we were looking at a house in 74. He probably was close to 50 then. So,
Okay.
but at any rate, I have to believe there's some connection.
Yes, more than likely. Yeah, all of the Winpiglers here are like almost definitely me. Like there's Grace Winpigler that goes to Hood, and she's like my very distinct cousin because her great-grandfather and my great-grandfather were brothers. And we just traced it back that far. And so it's, yeah, we're everywhere.
Caylee, being new to the area myself, if you ever want to partner to explore more about Arch, because I'm definitely learning as well, I'd love to partner with you in that. I think that would be a lot of fun. I know we got a chance to meet at the BOA meeting a couple of weeks ago, and that was really great. And the only other thing I would touch on is just, the fact that you mentioned that there were some things that were jarring, to find out here in Frederick. And I think it just kind of points to the fact that issues related to race and the difficulties and challenges of race weren't limited to the South, right? So what you're pointing out is that, it really was a, U.S. problem. And obviously issues happen in the North, and you touched on that in terms of redlining and things like that. So anyway, great work. And just, I wish I'd had a chance to get to know you as a student, but I'm glad that I have the chance to get to know you now.
Course. And like I'll give Arch mega props because the Ausherman Family Foundation has been working with them a lot, and they have done amazing work in structuring their organization because they're in the process of developing an African American Heritage Museum in Frederick, which is super exciting for me to be able to work with them on that and help them get that up and running. It's not like open yet or like near to being open, but just the fact that they're starting it, collecting the artifacts, bringing them all in one place is just mega exciting. And I was reminded in the chat of my Hood ring. So I love my legacy ring. I was super excited about it. I remember, I think that was the first time I met Kelly formally, that I came into her office and I was like, hey, I've got questions. She was like, what's up? And so I applied for a legacy ring, and I got Janet McDougall's legacy ring. And I then bestowed that legacy ring on my sister because I got a legacy ring from a close friend of mine from Hood. She graduated in '63. Her name's Dottie Engel. And so Dottie and I met each other through my grandmother, and I was working with her on the Frederick Veterans History Project. And that's how we met. And so she is just a firecracker of a woman and unstoppable. She's like in her 80s now and still travels the world and is the most feisty person I've ever met. And so like every time I see her, I'm like, that's who I want to be when I grow up. And so I had mentioned to her that I was applying for a legacy ring. She was like, you don't need to, I'll give you mine. And so like, it's been even more meaningful to me to have her legacy ring and wear it around, like, and it's engraved with her name. And I think about her all the time. And the other cool thing is that, my sister's legacy ring is a year like before mine, and then my best friend's is also like the year after this legacy ring. So it's like we're all connected anyways. Like I think about these three women would have known each other at Hood, and now we've got legacy rings that we can wear together and see each other in and think about each other. So it's like, yeah, it is just so many things of memory. And that was one of the things that I was really looking forward to in getting a legacy ring, is carrying around that history with me no matter where I went.
I'll just share that when Caylee contacted me, she's like, Kelly, I have kind of a weird question about my legacy ring. And I was like, what you got, hon? So can I give it to my sister? And then it all tumbled out. And I was like, of course you can. I love this story. I need to print it. It's going in the magazine. It's fabulous. I want to circle back to Arch, though. I was fortunate enough to be in Leadership Frederick. We were, of course, the longest class ever because it was during the pandemic. But I remember for Frederick History Day that Arch was talking about their they had just started to get organized and on their way. And it was interesting because we took that tour of Frederick, and what stood out for me was we went to the Weinberg Center, which I've been to before, and we've been since, but they had that sign out front that said coloreds only. And that's that brings it back to me when you talk about, no, Frederick, it was here in Frederick. And so I love that the Ausherman Foundation and you are working with that group, because they've got a voice that I can't wait to hear louder and louder. I just, again, it's all part of that history. So fantastic. I'm gonna try not to let the cat out of the bag, but is there something that Faith and you want to talk about or can talk about? And if you can't, you shut me up right
Yes.
now.
We absolutely can.
Okay, my gosh.
So yes, I'm gonna turn in the paper to you tomorrow so you can start to publish at places. But
Fantastic.
so, like I mentioned, I served on the Ausherman Family Foundation Board of Trustees as their first college representative. The leadership at the Ausherman Family Foundation looked at the trustees and said, we're missing some diversity here, not only in terms of just racial diversity, but also in age. So they intentionally went out and gathered a college student, myself, to be the first college board of trustee. And now I would like to say that we've onboarded our second board of trustee member, and that's Faith. Yes, she was a star candidate, and we were super thrilled to have her and interview her, and her perspective so far on the board of trustees has blown us all away. And so we're really grateful to have her.
I was dying to mention it, but I knew it was your story to tell. And I couldn't be prouder that you two have connected, because as I said, Faith is my favorite sophomore ever. And it's just amazing. So Faith, I don't know if you want to share about your experiences as it relates to Ausherman, since we've got Caylee here for you.
Yeah, I've absolutely loved. I've started in March, and I've absolutely loved my position that I've held so far. I've gone to a couple board meetings, gone to a couple of grants committee meetings, just kind of getting the lay of the land. I'm really enjoying learning about all of our partnerships with various nonprofits. That's been my favorite part. Just getting to see like the foundation of how the Ausherman Family Foundation is supporting these local nonprofits in Frederick and building up the community aspect. So I've really been enjoying it so far, and I can't wait to finish out my term through December and keep diving further into it. I'm hoping to, make some more independent connections with the different nonprofits, trying to find my footing here since I'm also new to the area. I'm trying to find my footing here in nonprofits that are specifically kind of unique to what I want to support. And Caylee's been a great help with that.
Can I just add that Lee Adams, the executive director of the Ausherman Family Foundation, is finishing her MBA at Hood and will be getting it this spring. So all kinds of great Hood alums with the foundation. And to be alums, Faith.
Well, I just think I love these connections. This goes along with the rings and the networking and everything else. And Faith, you can come over to the Alumni House and talk to Jamie about grants and talk to Nicole about philanthropy. And I'll just show you where the chocolate's kept in my office. I know. I have a job. I get it. I'm keeping an eye on our clock because I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm going to throw out a last call to anybody who would like to say anything. Winnie's got her hand up. Go, girl.
Yeah, I wanted to say that listening to Caylee, I felt a little bit like I was listening to a kindred spirit. And I wonder if this is how, I don't know if it's not totally unique to Hood, but I identify it with so much with Hood, is that you can tell that you just love learning and you just soak it up like a sponge. And that's what when I would talk to people about being at Hood and my classes. And I think because at the time we didn't have distribution requirements. So I was, for the most part, taking everything that I wanted to learn about. And I just felt like I sat there, kind of with my mouth hanging open and just soaking it all up like a sponge. And I'm still that kind of person. And if that's a character or a trait about Hood, I just want to encourage it, that it gets sort of really promoted and emphasized, because it just is oozing out of you, and it's really a joy to watch.
I agree 100%. I think any topic that Caylee is excited about makes her audience excited about too. Real quick, I saw Rachel had her hand up real quick. Did you want to say one more?
Briefly, what is the Ausherman Foundation?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. The Ausherman Family Foundation is a philanthropic grant giving organization in Frederick. So nonprofit organizations approach us, they apply, there's an application online, and they outline like different needs for their organization. And like, I need $20,000 to buy computers for my organization and that kind of thing. I mean, it's not just stuff like that. And the Ausherman Family Foundation, so we do the grant giving, but we also are instrumental in a lot of other projects. We bring networks and connections together. One of our network projects right now that we're finalizing is the transportation study. So we brought together community groups and talked to them and went, what is wrong with transportation? What more do you need from the community? How can we improve this? We have a youth network, which I'm on, and that is super exciting. And I love it so much. And it's all about what youth would want in a youth center and how we could best develop that to tailor to their needs and the needs of nonprofits. Because we recognize that there's a lot of nonprofits in Frederick serving youth that have nowhere to go. Like the Youth City Matrix, I don't think that they have a physical building. And so a lot of their activities are in schools or they're in some other place, in a church basement, and they're just jumping around. And if there was one central location, that would really help. And so we have a lot of those projects going on. We also give out multi-year grants. And so multi-year grants are just multiple years. But what we really focus on, though, is not so much in ensuring that you have money every year, but ensuring that you're growing and that you have achievable goals for those years. So the Ausherman Family Foundation does a lot of things, and it's really rewarding, and I love it a lot to get to interact with the community and feel like I'm making a good impact. So yeah, it's fantastic.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think that was the perfect ending to a perfect Caylee day. I want to thank everybody